pleasure and honor to be introducing to you Natasha Mwansa of Zambia, who is going to be our guest for the 5th edition of IMF Inspired. I'm sorry. The meetings haven't yet started and I'm losing my voice. I'm in trouble. It is a fantastic series of events that actually Sabina Batia, our Deputy Secretary of the IMF, has initiated, and it brings inspiration on the premises of the IMF for all of you to enjoy and share. So why do we have Natasha as our guest? She is an example of a generation finding its voice. And boy, what a voice Natasha has. She is a student at the University of Zambia, her home country. She has become a powerful advocate for girls, women, and children in Africa and across the world. And she has been speaking on these issues since she was 13. She is very able to communicate what the Sustainable Development Goals actually mean, especially in health and well-being, in education, economic opportunity, gender equality. And by speaking up, she brings the voice of a whole generation of Gen Z to the rest of us. She just told me something that I found interesting to share with you, that her name in her local language, Natasha, means thank you. And I know that by the time she's done with speaking to us, this is what you will feel for her. So thank you, Natasha, for coming to the IMF. You have this audience all geared to listen to you. So bring that powerful voice of yours, and off you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristalina, for those lovely remarks, and a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm Sabina Bhatia from the IMF. So today is about Generation Z. Who is Gen Z, you may ask? Well, Gen Z is anyone born between 1997 and 2012. So as you came into the room, we took a poll to figure out how many Gen Zers we have in the audience. So here are the results of the poll. No Gen Zers, or 13, yes, 13 Gen Z. I guess the bar is not showing up. Yes, so we have only 13 Gen Zers. Well, I guess this room is not exactly representative of the world at large, because Gen Zers are set to become the world's largest generation by the end of the year, outnumbering millennials. So get ready, millennials, to be displaced. And a recent survey found that a majority of Gen Zers feel that being politically and socially engaged is an important part of their identity. I think it's fair to say that Gen Zers are not impressed by the world that my generation, Gen X, or baby boomers, are leaving for them. They want change, and they want it now. And they are unafraid to speak up of the issues that matter to them, be it climate change, gun control, gender identity, girls' rights, healthcare, you name it. But what strikes me about Gen Zers is how young some of them are, 13, when they became activists. Some of them were barely in high school. You remember Malala when she first spoke up, or more recently Greta Thunberg, or Melati Wiesen, who was our IMF-inspired speaker at our meetings last year in Bali. Powered by social media, these young voices are reaching global audiences as their Twitter and Instagram posts ricochet around the world with amazing impact. So today we have with us another impressive Gen Zer, Natasha Mwansa of Zambia. She's a passionate advocate, as Kristalina said, of youth and especially girls' issues. But you know what? I'm going to let Natasha introduce herself. So let's watch this video.
Yeah, so key message is really that I have for every leader that's out here today. Do not do anything without us, for us, because one, we need young people in key positions of power. There is no way that you can be making decisions like she mentioned about young people's health, young people's education, young people's this, and then all you do is just let them be beneficiaries. We're not going to be beneficiaries. That's not happening anymore. It's 2019. So give us power. We need positions of power. And then secondly, I really want to talk about prioritizing things that have to do with young people and female empowerment. Look, it's enough that you can promise us that there will be gender equality. It's enough that you can say this and that, but we need this reflected. You can't have a national budget and adolescent health is amounting to 0.1%. That's not working. We need these reflections in things like the national budget, increase budgetary allocations to things that have to do with young people, increase budgetary allocations when it comes to gender equality and female empowerment. I hate that we call this thing child marriages. That's pedophilia. It's inhumane. These things have to be worked on and they have to be fought. We can't have girls being married off. We can't have girls not accessing education. We can't have girls not being able to take care of themselves every time of the month simply because of stereotypical behavior. No. We need gender equality and we need this reflected in national priorities. And then, you're making it hard for me to speak.
I think that deserves a round of applause. So, Natasha, that was amazing. We are delighted to have you with us. So, tell us about your journey. How did you go from Zambia to being on stage with prime ministers and presidents? And you are 18?
Yes, I am 18. Firstly, it's really nice to be here. We have 13 Generation Zs. Can I see your hands? At least can I know where the Gen Zs are? We can give us a round of applause because this conversation is about us. It's really nice to be here. So she asked about my journey all the way from Zambia, being on stage in Canada just a few months ago. I have been an advocate and an activist since I was 12 years old, almost turning 13. And this happened because I joined an organization called the Media Network on Child Rights and Development. So they came to our school and we auditioned. And all I knew how to do really was to talk like this. I just knew how to debate and talk really well. And I thought to myself, well, I could use my voice for other things. And so if this NGO is providing the opportunity, then why not? And so when I joined it, we had all sorts of trainings, would go in all sorts of meetings, and the exposure itself just made me realize that I'm actually home because I found a place where I could use my voice and I could understand issues better and I could actually be influential in the way that I did what I was doing. So after joining the NGO, like I mentioned, exposure after exposure, I found myself on what is known as the African Union Commission's Youth Advisory Board. I was their youngest member. Our term ended last year. And so when I joined it, this man was there and, you know, he kept pushing me and he said, have you heard of Women Deliver? And I said, no, I don't think I have. And so he said, you should look them up. And he kept texting me. I think he texted me like 30 times and I kept ignoring him because I didn't understand how important it actually was. And so when I read about them and I saw that the deadline to apply was ending, I applied and then I was accepted to be a Women Deliver young leader, class of 2018. And so when we applied, they had sent out a form for the Women Deliver conference and they asked us what we want to see. And one of the things that I had put out was I would like to see more young people actually speaking on these stages because I know the majority won't necessarily be young, but then they still have a voice and they need to be heard. And so I received an email coming back and said, let's see what this can look like. Would you actually like to speak on stage during the opening ceremony? And I said, yes, why not? So that's how it just continued like that. And that's how I found myself on that wonderful stage with all those amazing people.
So you talked about finding your voice. So describe for us this process of self-discovery and becoming an activist. And if you have any tips for the 13 Gen Zers we have here.
So finding my voice for me was quite an interesting journey, honestly. I was really young when we moved back to the tourist capital, that was Livingston, back home. And so when we moved there, I went to a school, and it was something called a rich kids school, so to say. We were not necessarily in that class, but my parents could still afford to take me there and pay for my school fees. So I was there. I was the youngest student, the smallest student, the smartest student, the brightest student, and so, you know, I couldn't blame them. I mean, it's automatic that they would be jealous of me. So, and so when I joined the school, I was there and I started experiencing a lot of bullying. And it was one thing to be bullied by my fellow pupils and students there, but then it got so bad that sometimes my own teacher would pick on me. And so I would be there quiet and vulnerable and insecure about everything that was happening because I literally couldn't do anything at that moment. But then this one time I just decided I've had enough. And so a bully walked up to me and he tried to bully me, and I looked him in the face and I told him off. And you know, it got really weird because the whole class turned and was like, who's that with the squeaky voice? Like, they've never heard my voice before, but you know. But yeah, so at that moment I found my voice and I expressed myself, and telling off that bully felt good. I felt as though I needed money. I felt as though I needed all these cool fancy purses or whatever that everyone else had. I felt as though I needed strength, but then in that moment I realized that all I needed was my voice to defend myself. And so as time went by, I would do that, and eventually I became the bully. So I would I would pick on people, not necessarily like just find them and pick on them, because I knew what it felt like being the one who's in the room being picked on, but then I would just hurt people's feelings because I could, you know. And so I realized that's a waste of my voice. If I could be that powerful, if I could be that influential, if people could listen to me, why would I waste my voice just hurting people's feelings? And so I decided that there's better use for my voice, and that's how I started going through this process of discovery. I tried so many things. I did this and that, until I came across this amazing young lady. We just heard of her, Malala. And so when I read about her, and she was speaking about how powerful her voice is, how powerful your voice is, and I just looked and said, I can be that voice. I can stand in the gap and actually represent whatever issues we're facing as young people, because we need more of that. And so that's how I decided that my voice is going to change the world. And from then on, it's been changing the world.
Oh, wow. So an important message there to Gen Zers: stand up and use your voice for positive change.
Exactly.
So Natasha, you mentioned to me a little while ago that you've started your own foundation.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about it, what you do?
Okay, so I recently started a foundation. It's called the Natashas Foundation. It's a reflection of most of the work I've been doing over the past years. And what we do is we actually work with all sorts of young people aged 10 to 24. And so we look at young people and identify the problems that they're facing. And then we realize that they each have got this unique voice to them that we can actually amplify if only we could empower them, equip them, and enlighten them with what they need to utilize that full potential. And so after realizing this, we just decided with a group of people that I work with, my colleagues, that we wouldn't just only identify problems and amplify those problems, but we want to be that solution that we've been crying out for. We want to be that voice that speaks out, that amplifies the voices of other young people. And so we do that through various things and various means. And like I mentioned, we've only been operational for a few months, so we haven't had much groundwork, but then so far we've invested in quite a number of young people, and it's been amazing. So we basically just bring young people together, amplify their voices, help them discover who they are, and provide as much as we can for them to realize their full potential.
So Natasha, you've had a busy year. You went to the Women Deliver conference, and you were also awarded a Global Health Leader Award by the World Health Organization, right? Yes. For your work in adolescent health. So why is the issue of adolescent health so important to you?
Adolescent health for me is quite cardinal because, like I've mentioned, I've been working in this field for quite some years now, and I've been in adolescent health for, I think, close to 4 years. And I would work in a field. There was this place I would go to for 3 years of my life. I would go there every Thursday, and it's in this community. I would go there as a community healthcare worker, and I would go there as a peer educator. And so when we'd sit down in this room, and we had various young people on the first day, and all these young people people, we are so ignorant about their health issues. And you know, you're talking to them and you can literally feel the burden that they don't know how important this is. They don't even realize that they actually have rights, for instance, that have to do with health and all that. And so educating them and talking to them and sharing experiences with them, for me, just opened up this whole opportunity that allowed me to enlarge my capacity to actually work with more and more young people on health. And then I came to realize that the health of young people is quite important because not only does it affect how they function if it comes to their physical health, but even their mental health. It affects things like productivity. It affects everyone economically, politically, socially, and in various different ways. If we look at the world's most devastating issues right now, apart from poverty, it's probably ignorance, of course, but then this is largely attributed to health. We are in a generation where most of us are young and most of us have got energy and most of us have got so much potential, but we can't realize any of this because our health is in danger. We are not healthy enough to actually fulfill that and function as well as we ought to. And it's largely attributed to things like healthcare services, things like even just knowing that these things exist, as it has been highlighted by various studies and all that. So the health of young people is important because it not only helps them at this stage, which is a key cardinal stage of their life, but then it also affects us later on. It shapes what the future will look like. If they don't work on anything now and plant now because they're unhealthy, then later on we'll have nothing to look forward to. So their health is very important and it's quite evident in various different ways.
Okay, just changing tack a little bit. We're going to do another poll with the audience. So if you could take out your phones, and those of you all who took the earlier poll, you should have that up on your browser. For the others, please type in www.menti.com and use the code 679312, no spaces. And so our first question is, how many girls do you think under the age of 18 are married every year worldwide? Is it 6 million, 10 million, or 12 million? And I'm going to invite all of those watching online to also participate in the poll. Ask you to resist the temptation to check your email or Twitter. Instead, participate in the poll. So, we know them. Okay. Everyone done? www.menti.com, 679312, no spaces. Okay, so I think we have the responses. All right. Okay. So the correct answer, and the audience, you all seem to have gotten the right answer. It is 12 million. Unfortunately, this is the number of girls worldwide who are married under the age of 18. Absolutely appalling. And I just want to show you a chart which shows that sub-Saharan Africa has the highest percentage of girls who are married before 18, more than a third. So, Natasha, just your thoughts on why is it so high and what can be done? I know you've talked a bit about, education, etc., but, have you worked on this issue?
Yes. When I saw the topic of child marriage, and I went back to a time when I attended the second Girls Summit on Ending Child Marriages. It's organized by the African Union, and the last one was held in Ghana last year, towards the end of the year. And I was seated there, and I had just given a speech as well during the opening about what exactly can be done to curb child marriages. And so this amazing young girl, very vibrant, she was 16 at the time, came up to me and sat down. I can't remember what country she was from, but I think it's either Ghana itself or if not, a neighboring country. And so she came to me and said she needs my help, and I asked her why, and she said, if I go back home, I'm going to be married off. And I'm thinking to myself, how is a girl attending a summit and then she's actually at risk herself of going home and getting married off? And so I sat down with her and I spoke to her, and she started explaining some of the things that had been going on at home. And then I got to look at her, and I actually got to realize that there's such a linkage. It happens to all these 12 million girls, and the third of them that actually come from sub-Saharan Africa. One of the key causes and reasons why these girls are married off at a young age is firstly poverty. Sometimes girls are looked at and they seem as though they're a burden to their families, a financial burden, because they have to pay for their clothes, they have to pay for their this, they have to buy their, they have to buy things for them to take care of themselves, and then later on they're actually going to leave the house. So for most people or most families, they look at girls as not as resourceful or the resource, or as an investment, so to say, and so there's not much return on them. And then for others, they just do it so they can make money, because you have to pay dowry for you to get the girl. And so when we looked at that, and I got to realize that this girl was actually at risk of being married off simply because her parents wanted to make money, she asked me what exactly she can do, where she can go. And I took her to some of the organizations there, and they promised that they were going to help her out, and they did. And so looking at some of these issues, the major reason really is poverty. And then secondly, it's the traditions and norms that surround this. Sometimes we look at it, and like I had mentioned in the video, we can't be calling it child marriages, because if you call a tree, for instance, you will treat it as a tree. You will water it as a tree. You will cherish it as a tree. If you call an exit, you will cherish it as an exit. If you call child marriage, you will cherish it and treat it as marriage. And by definition, marriage is union by two people who are in agreement. How can a 50-year-old man marry a 14-year-old girl, and you call that marriage? You call that an agreement. You call that a union that you can just live with. The fact that we call it marriage, it triggers this response in our head to say, there is not much we can do about it. They agreed on it, so let's let it be. But if you call it pedophilia, it sort of gives you that straight, like, oh, we have to do something. So yes, do something, because that's what we're supposed to do. So we have to rename it. We have to rename it, because it starts from that. The norm around that, the culture and custom, what we think of it comes from what we name it. So let's change the name. It's not child marriage. I don't think 12 million girls agree to just get married off and have their future ruined and not be able to, enjoy their fundamental human rights, their right to education, to have everything that they've dreamed of being taken away from them, or to be in such healthy or unhealthy, to have such healthy risks on them and burdens. So it's all that. It's poverty, it's the norms around it, it's the traditions, the practices, what people believe, and the benefits that people think they get from there, but they actually don't. And also, I had mentioned this earlier, I was doing a research with an NGO back home, and we realized that in some rural areas, it's not just the girls who are being married off. For instance, even guys are being married off, boys are being married off. And in some instances, both boys and girls are marrying each other and leaving, they're eloping. And so it's an issue around that. For them, we can't call it pedophilia, because if a 14-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy get married, then it was their decision. But then that's still not right. So why are we not strengthening any policies at a national base and having these legal frameworks actually curb the perpetrators of these things? Why is it that government sometimes can be so quiet on it? Because billions of dollars are spent as a result of the consequences of child marriages, right? Meaning that we've got billions of dollars available to actually curb child marriages before they take place. Where is this money going? Do we not identify the issue at the root cause at the beginning, and do we only see it at the end? Why are we not transforming how we spend this money and direct it and invest in these girls' education, invest in showing them their worth, invest in educating these parents to realize that they don't have to go for that? Where is all this money we're spending? Why can't it be redirected to invest in actually going into the key issue and looking at the root causes and changing all that before we actually spend on us looking at it and then advocating at the end for something we can't fix? So it's around all those issues, the priorities that we're also having, the conversations we're having around it, and where we're taking the money.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And as you said, I think the relationship, whatever you call it, between child marriage and either population growth or women's earning potential, health, education has been well documented. But a paper that some of my colleagues at the IMF are doing on the staff, they're looking at the relationship between child marriage and economic growth. And so I just say watch this space. It promises to be an interesting staff paper. So we're going to do another poll with the audience. So I'd ask you to take out your phones again, and we have another question. This time it's on girls' education. So the same website, www.menti.com, and the same code, 679312. And the question is, how many girls do you think between the ages of 6 and 17 are not enrolled in school worldwide? So this worldwide, not enrolled in school, 30 million, is it 90 million, is it 130 million? So has everyone done the poll? Those online, please participate as well. Okay, so I think most of our audience has gotten the answer correct. It is 130 million. It's an awful number. It is a shocking number that 130 million girls worldwide are not in school. They should be. So how bad is this number? Let's pause and think about it. So this number is equivalent to the population of 18 countries. 18. So 18 countries, it's as if all the people in these countries, none of them went to school. That's how large the number is. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that number. But Natasha, your thoughts?
It's actually very sad to find that 130 million, and like you said, imagine 18 whole countries could be filled with that number, and this could be 6 to 17-year-old girls who are not in school. And we know and understand that school is very important because it helps reduce illiteracy, for one. It helps them be able to socialize with everyone else. It helps them realize and identify who they are. It enlightens them and gives them the knowledge and skills they need to actually survive in a world like this one. But then the fact that they're not enrolled in school is quite devastating, and the reasons that could be there, of course, like we've mentioned, poverty could be one of them, and even just the fact that some of them could be living in really rural areas where some of these services and facilities are not available for them to be educated. So it's quite sad that 130 million girls worldwide are not enrolled in schools, because this is not only devastating on our end, it's devastating on theirs. We are the ones who are not benefiting on the potential they have, the ideas they could realize, the innovation and everything that they have in them, simply because they haven't been exposed to an education system that I think all of us in here have been exposed to. So imagine your life being like that, 6 to 17. These are ages of cardinal growth. These are stages that are important to every girl and every child really out there. 6 to 17 is an important age. So imagine not being educated and enlightened. That means that they've missed out on so many opportunities for growth, for development, and we ourselves have missed out on so much that we could have gained from these girls. So it's actually really, really sad that this many girls are not enrolled in schools.
Right. So talking about girls' education and health, and I mean, you would agree that real change takes more than half the population. So how would you bring men, especially young men, into the conversation? And I'm very glad to see so many men in the audience. So that's excellent. Yes.
That's very true, actually. Sometimes we focus on female empowerment, and it is very important, but then we should realize that female empowerment, rather, should not be done at the expense of guys or boys, because sometimes they tend to feel left out, and we forget that they themselves need to be empowered as well. I remember that when I was working back home on a project, and we would go in these communities and we would work with these boys. They would come for meetings, and we would sit down and we would ask them questions about what their view is on girls and all that. And most of them would say things like they are weak, they don't understand things too much, they are emotional, they are this, and that. And then later on, we help them understand that these are girls who actually change the world. There are women who are out there who their existence can be attributed to, for instance, their mothers or their friends or their sisters and all that. And as time went by, we realized that they actually had a mindset change. And so when we took a survey, we realized that most of the guys got that mindset as a result of how they were raised. It's probably something that they inherited from their fathers, from their grandfathers, from their uncles, and from the men around them. So looking at that, we thought we should target other men to come and influence the minds of these people, men who've already been transformed in how they think and view women, for instance. And so when the men came on board, they actually developed even faster and changed faster. And we felt bad. We felt incapable for it. And we were like, how come they didn't do this when we were doing it? But then we got to realize that sometimes that's what change requires. It requires someone else who's going through the same experiences as they are, someone who can understand them better to change that. And then we also got to realize that these men didn't only want to be, these boys rather, didn't only want to be empowered so that they could protect girls or empower girls. They wanted to be empowered for their sake, because they also had problems that they were facing and didn't know where to go or where to take them. And so using that strategy, we empowered them so that they could discover who they are as well, so that they could also become agents of change of their lives, but then they could also help empower and protect these girls. And we realized that it could be that easy. That's the simple solution that we have. Engaging men and boys is very important, because the conversations we have around female empowerment, about them being vulnerable, is usually attributed to how men treat them and how men think. And so if we can target them and change them and involve them in this, because trust me, they want to be involved, but they just don't know how to. So if we can show them how to be involved, but then we can also show them that this is for them to enjoy as well, then we're going to be off to a good start.
Okay, so educating men is key. Yes, that changing mindset. So I want to ask you about another issue that has been in the headlines recently, and that is on climate change. So we know that Gen Zers care a lot about climate change. We've seen the Fridays for Future marches all over the world. So how is climate change affecting Sub-Saharan Africa?
It's quite devastating right now in Sub-Saharan Africa, to be honest, because, for instance, there are countries like, I'll give an example of maybe my own country, where sometimes power could cut every day, and it could cut for even more than 5 hours a day, or even 8 hours a day. And so you're looking at that, and you're looking at how are people making money, how are they going to be productive, how is machinery working, how are they even able to study, for instance, and prepare for school, or do anything that they really want to do. And so it's really affected things like hydropower energy, because we depend on water for most of our electricity and energy. So using that as an instance, that's one thing that it's affected. We don't have many sources of energy as a region of Sub-Saharan Africa, and the main one we depend on is water. And so if there is no water in rivers and all that as a result of climate change affecting the weather patterns and us having things like droughts, then automatically we're affected. And then it also affects things like food security and agriculture. Agriculture is one of the main sources of income for many Sub-Saharan Africans. And so when weather patterns change and the climate is also changing, it affects how much crop and produce we're actually going to have and later on sell on the market. And then it's also affecting food security, because right now we have countries in Sub-Saharan Africa that have been declared to be in a hunger situation and all those, because they don't have enough food supplied to them as a result of climate change. So climate change has affected us in diverse ways, and it's also affecting our health, because, for instance, if there's no power and people decide that they're going to chop down wood so they can burn it and have charcoal to cook, for instance, and then they cook that charcoal, but they're using the same wood that they're burning, and, you know, it's affecting how they're breathing, it's affecting their heart, but then it's also affecting the environment at large. And yet Africa itself is the least it's the least continent that's contributing to any carbon emissions worldwide, but then it's the most affected because of also things like technological advances that are supposed to help us adapt to climate change, but we don't have many of that. And so because of all these things, it's affecting us quite badly. It's affecting productivity, it's affecting us politically, economically, socially, and we could have a conversation about just all the devastating effects, and it's really sad, and it's a burden for most of us.
Yeah, I think we could continue this conversation on climate change forever. So those of you who are interested to hear more about this, tomorrow we have a seminar on climate change in central banks, so I do hope you'll join us for that. One last question before I turn it over to the audience. So here you have people from ministries of finance, central bank governors. You also have people from the IMF and the World Bank. What is your message to everyone here?
Okay, so in this moment, I think for me, I really do like it when I stand up and talk, when I have a message and statement to give. Because
all right.
I do this because I feel as though I am heard more, and I think the only way we can actually create impact is when we take a stance. And so my key message today really is, we have a world that's changing dynamically, really. Every day, there's always something that's changing. And right now, all the global systems that we're seeing, all the decisions that are being made, for instance, by the millennials and all that, but then Generation Z is going to inherit that later on in the future. So my key message for everyone here who's able to influence this is really invest and involve us. Invest in the things that matter to us the most. Invest in youth activities. Invest in our health, our education. Invest in us, because that's the key to actually moving forward and developing and securing a future, not just for us, but for you as well. And then secondly, involve us in these investments. Involve us in these decisions. Like I mentioned, there is no way you can be doing things and making decisions for us without us, because you're doing that against us. It's harming us. You don't understand our story because we know it better. We experience it. We're the ones living it. So we have the solutions. Hence, involve us. You're making plans about the budget. Involve us. Let us show you where the money should go. Let us show you where we should do this and how it should be done, because you're doing it for us. And I really would love to thank the IMF for this opportunity, because for me it shows that world leaders are actually open to listening to what we have to say, and that's a good step. But it's one thing to want to listen, it's one thing to give me an applause, but it's another thing to act on it. And that's another thing. Sometimes you do sit down and you do listen, but then because you don't act on it, I want to encourage every Gen Z out here, everyone who can really act. The best way for you to actually get a reaction from them is if we act. So let's act as well grow, and let's give them the solution that we can have and the ideas we have, and let's show them that it can work, and then they'll join us. Otherwise, invest and involve us. It's really that simple. Thank you.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So, that was amazing.
Thank you.
On that, I'm going to open the floor up just to a few questions. So if anyone has a question, there are 2 microphones. So maybe I'll take a few questions. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
First of all, I wanted to thank you for your talk today. It's really important for us to hear in such an important space with so much visibility. And I'm here as a delegate for a program called Civil Diplomacy, which aims to engage Brazilian youth in issues as foreign policy, foreign trade. So my question is about motivation. How is it that you do not to get yourself get unmotivated and get through a wall of skepticism, a space in which we are most times called naive and only dreamers? So how is it that you do not to get yourself?
How to get myself motivated?
Unmotivated.
Unmotivated.
Yeah.
How I get unmotivated?
Not to be motivated, I mean.
Not to be unmotivated, to be motivated.
Or to be motivated. How do I get courageous and motivated to do what I do, despite all the barriers that can be around? And so that's a very important question, actually. And I think sometimes that's where it all takes us to. Many young people today do not do what they want to do because they are afraid, because they feel as though no one can listen to them or will listen to them. And like she mentioned, there's all this stigma around us, people saying, you don't know what you're saying, you don't understand it. Well, the first thing I would like to encourage the other generations, before I get to our question, is then teach us how to do it. I think the best way to actually help us is by showing us that you're willing to help us so that we can come to a conclusive decision. If we're not doing it the right way, then show us. But then the best thing that I have come to learn in my journey as a young person, having to come in meetings with so many other people around and so many, stigma and all those problems and barriers that I may face, is I just do it. I just realize and tell myself, look, sometimes if you're not going to be the voice, then no one else is going to be heard. And you have to realize that what you say today is going to affect many generations to come. It's going to affect other people. It's not just for you. So if you're not courageous enough to do it, it becomes a big issue if you're doing it for yourself. But then if you're doing it because you know a whole generation could be affected, then you do it. Your adrenaline just pumps, and it's just there like, I have to do it because no one else seems to be willing enough to do it. And so I would just encourage you to just do it. It won't always be there. It may be scary. It may be this and that, but then just do it, because at the end of the day, it's not just for you alone. It's for everyone around you.
Okay, just do it. So, okay, next question.
Good afternoon, Natasha. I just want to say that you're very motivational as a young woman, particularly being 18 years of age. I'm from Barbados. A lot of times we find that young women aren't as vocal as they need to be. So recently we founded a program called Pink Parliament that focuses on getting young girls interested in politics. My question is, in a world where women are often seen as emotional and they're underrepresented within politics, and they do represent over 50% of the world's population, how do you see us encouraging young women to want to be involved in politics and to want to be active as it relates to being elected?
Okay, great. That's a very important question. And I like that you asked in a world where many women are seen as emotional and all that. I, myself, for instance, can be very emotional. And I don't think that's a weakness. It's actually a strength. It's actually who women are. It's an attribute that they have that can actually drive change. And so our emotions can help us, for instance, understand the issues and risks that are involved. It can help us understand where exactly we're supposed to target, who exactly we're supposed to take care of, how exactly the resources are supposed to be spent. So an approach that I would encourage you to use is, don't tell the women to not be emotional. Don't let other people tell you that you're not supposed to be emotional, but then learn how to use your emotions to actually bring good. Learn how to drive your emotions and turn that energy into driving the political change you want to drive. Use your emotions to win over a crowd. If you have to make the crowd cry, let them cry. That's, it's a strength you have to learn to accept, because it's in you. Your emotions are what make us, it's what makes us female. So we have to learn to utilize that. We don't have to change that, but then just help them identify that it's a strength and they can actually use that.
Okay, on that note, please join me in giving a round of applause to Natasha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Natasha.
Yes,
Thank you very much.